Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 9 o'clock here in the morning, November the 1st, Monday, November the 1st. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. And we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room is up and running here if anybody would like to come sit in the chat room. And I'm going to pop the link in there to what I want to talk about this morning. We're still looking at anger resources, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES.com. Lots of great information on there from Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz, two therapists that work in the field of anger management and have a lot to talk about as far as abusive behavior, controlling behavior, road rage, just everything. This is a great website. I hope everybody will go check it out. And there's a few more articles I kind of wanted to look at while we're kind of focusing on this whole issue of anger management, and it was a huge issue for me, and that's why I wanted to really kind of look into it, because I'm working on changing my own behaviors, and it's helpful for me because I had a lot of anger issues, anger management problems, really didn't know how to deal with anger, and was never shown how to properly deal with it. Growing up in the home that I grew up in, never really learned how to properly deal with it, so I'm having to do that now, and that's what so many of us have to do, adult survivors. We're working through, a lot of things that really wasn't our fault. It's just put on us, and these behaviors we just learned and picked up in our environment wherever we grew up. And so many times I know so many survivors, out there, we have to go back and relearn this stuff and redo it. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Sorry about missing my show this morning. I was planning on being on at 6 o'clock a.m., didn't make it, so I had to reschedule for 9. And tomorrow morning I will be on at 6 o'clock in the morning, my time, because I have to be up early. So this was my last day to sleep in, pretty much. So I'm glad to be here. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I just want everybody to know I'm a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I just wanted to be one more voice out here to say, hey, you got to hold on, get some help where you can, whether it's finding a therapist, a counselor, group support, online group support, whatever you have to do. Call a crisis line, call a friend, make sure you hang in there. I know so many people who have suffered in this and who were abused as children, and I know so many people who did not make it, sadly enough, and I was on that road myself, and that's why I wanted to be one more voice out here for people, because I know I appreciate all those people, who are out here, who I look up to, who are saying, hey, we can do this, talking to me as a survivor, right, telling me, hey, you can do this, you can make it. And so I appreciate those people who are doing that, and I look up to them, and they're big-time mentors in my life. And, that's what I want to do, is just be one more voice to tell other people, hey, we can do this. We can heal. We can learn to move forward in our life. We don't have to destroy ourselves. We don't have to destroy the rest of our lives. It's hard, when you're abused as a child, you really have no choice but to take what's going on in the home. And we're forced to live these lives, and then as an adult, right, it is actually our responsibility to get help, to be our own kind of best advocate. We have to know what we need. We have to know what we want as far as healing goes, as far as, having a good life, right? And I certainly didn't want to suffer on for the rest of my life, and I just pictured myself just, continually suffering through the horrors of being abused as a child, right? It really did a lot of damage psychologically, mentally, physically as well. So I kind of thought that I was supposed to destroy my life too, right? So I was always self-sabotaging and always just sitting around in a depression and a funk and not happy with what had happened to me and my family, and never really thought about being a survivor. I always considered myself a victim, right? And, not necessarily sitting around, woe is me, all the time. I did have my pity parties every now and then, but for the most part I was okay and able to work and hold down jobs and have fun. But then at the end of the day, I was this abused, wounded person that inside of me, that wounded child, really, that I just did not know how to get in touch with, didn't even know if I should try, and really didn't know how to go about feeling different about life, and until about 3.5 years ago. So that's the whole issue. I finally thought, hey, I'm going to win this fight, man. I'm going to win. My parents are going to lose because they're not going to get the best of me as an adult. They did get the best of me as a child, and as a young teen, and they did get the best of me actually until the age of 41. But now, I'm like, no way. I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to win this battle, and the way I'm going to do it is to heal, to move forward, to have a good life, to learn to love myself, all these things, right? So this is what I'm doing, and I just want to be one more voice of encouragement for people to hang in there, right? Hold on, get some help, don't suffer in silence and sadness, and it's just so horrific what we've had to go through. So that's the whole issue, right? I know I've been there, and I know how hard it is, and I know what it's like to be on that dark side. I know what it's like to be on that side where there's just doesn't seem to be any hope. There doesn't seem to be any way of feeling better. I've been there. I know exactly what that's all about. It's a horrible place to be. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And, that's the whole issue. It's really the difference between where I was 3.5 years ago and right now is like night and day. It's completely different. I feel completely different about the whole situation. And why? Because I started to learn to love myself, right? I hated myself. I hated my life. My parents made me hate myself, and they made me hate this life, right? And so I talk a whole lot about that stuff. And, I learned how to love myself. I thought, no way I love myself. And I did not deserve what happened to me. And I started to really put the fight on as far as, what, I'm going to fight to win this fight, man. I'm going to fight to stay here and stay alive and stay well and help as many people as I can to get to this other side, right? So that's the thing. I'm not a counselor or therapist, and I'm just another person who cares about people, and I really wanted to just be one more voice. So you have to listen at your own discretion, especially if you're a survivor. I talk a lot about everything to do with abuse, so you have to be careful listening to my shows. They can trigger, any show like this can trigger a survivor. It could cause you to feel bad and have a bad day, and might hurt yourself or someone else. Don't do that. If any show like this makes you uncomfortable, you have to turn it off, right? And know how you're feeling that day, how you're feeling today, how you're feeling any day. Are you strong enough to listen to this kind of stuff, right? It's so important. And, you have to listen at your own discretion, right? I'm talking about abuse and everything related to abuse. So everyone who listens to my show has to listen at their own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, because I'm all about protecting children. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're fighting to save children's lives and stand up and protect children and protect child rights. So you have the right to be protected, and you have the right to know that there is adult material on my shows. And you have to be careful what you're doing in chat rooms and what you're doing online. And you need to be very much aware that there are a lot of sick people out there, hundreds of thousands of child sexual predators at any time, trying to get a hold of children. And they'll use any means that they can. So check out the FBI's website. They have a great website on internet safety, FBI.gov, internet safety for parents, internet safety for children, internet safety for families. Get the information, get the facts. Learn how to keep yourself safe, right? So we're going to get right into this topic here. And I was talking on Friday. We were all sort of looking at this one section that was, it was 20 steps on how to, I'm going to get you the right title here, Taking the Steps to Stop the Abuse by Dave Decker. And he had 20 steps here. We ended up like step 7 or step 16 or something. We were almost there. He's addressing the whole steps of stopping the violence, right? This is a book that he wrote, Stopping the Violence, a group model to change men's abusive attitudes and behaviors. He's kind of focusing on men in this book, but the thing is I haven't read this book, but I just by the title, he's talking about men. But I think these steps are really could be used for anybody, because I know myself they actually kind of pertain to me and anybody out there who has an anger management problem or is abusive and has an abusive, has abusive behavior going on in their life, because it's just a cycle passed down, which was my case. That's what I was talking about last week, is that this cycle of abuse was just passed down to me, so I was just continuing to live like that and treat other people like that and myself. And, until we address it and learn to work through it and learn that it's not right, we just don't even sometimes recognize it, right? So he lists 20 steps. I'll just read through a few of them. 1, acknowledge to yourself and others that you have a problem with anger, abuse, and control. And then he goes on and talks about it. And 2, address mental health and chemical use issues when they are present in your life. And 3, come to know that when you are abusive to others, you are always feeling inadequate, insecure, powerless, and unlovable. And 4, realizing that controlling and abusive behavior hurts you and those you love. And number 5, understand that anger is different from abuse and control. And number 6, recognize that becoming abusive is always a choice. Number 7, take responsibility for what you feel, how you think, and how you act instead of blaming others. Number 8, accept that you cannot fix, change, or control other people. That's a big one. Number 9, remember that you can always take a time out in a potentially explosive situation. Number 10, think about the potential consequences before you become controlling and abusive. Number 11, identify clearly what triggers your anger and your controlling and abusive behavior. Number 12, slow down enough to notice what you're thinking. He goes on and talks about all this stuff in these different steps, right? Number 13, become aware of all your feelings, not just your anger, and learn to respectfully communicate these feelings to others, including people outside your immediate family. Number 14, turn conflicts into positive problem-solving opportunities. And I think that's where we pretty much left off. Conflict is normal, he says, and to be expected in intimate human relationships. In fact, intimacy cannot exist without conflict at times. So it says, don't make your partner into the enemy. That certainly isn't the way you started out with her or him, right? It says, make her into a teammate and work together to figure out how to deal with issues that arise in your relationship and in your own life. So that's what he says here for number 14. Turn conflicts into positive problem-solving opportunities. And I think that's really, I mean, for men or women, like anybody can be an abuser, right? We all know this. My mom was my main abuser. My dad was also very abusive, but my mom was my main abuser, and the one who I was always kind of worried about and keeping an eye on, because she was so vicious to me, you know what I mean? So, women can be abusive too, and so that's the whole issue. It's not just men, and this piece here could really be for anyone. We have to really, if you're in an abusive relationship, your partner shouldn't be abusing you. And if you're the one doing the abusing, then you shouldn't be abusing your partner. We should be a team. And, that's the whole issue. When my sweetheart and I were together, when we first were trying to work it out and see if we're compatible and whatnot. And my behavior was just like my mom's, and I didn't even realize it. I was smashing dishes around in the sink and throwing things at him, yelling and cursing at him, which he didn't like because he didn't like foul language. See, and I had a pretty foul mouth at that time. I was just in my 30s, turning 30, and had just left my abusive parents after living with them for 30 years and taken all their garbage, and was actually taken advantage of completely by my mom, and then told that I was not wanted again after she set up this false peace and this false truce with me for about 8 years, and then decided that she was going to throw it all back in my face and say that she never ever cared about me or anybody else in that family, that she did not want us, that she did not love us, that we were all just nothing to her, just worthless. And threw that in my face at the age of 29, and I decided to leave the country. I wanted to get away from them so far that I was like, I'm moving to Canada, because I was a dual citizen and I could move to Canada, thankfully. So I left them. I moved 2,000 miles away. Was so glad to be out from underneath her thumb and away from the garbage that had been going on my whole entire life with them, being around their sadistic and really abusive behavior. They were very much sadists, and they were very sick. And so I was glad to be away from them. But my behavior hadn't changed just because I moved 2,000 miles away. I was still very abusive, to people around me and to myself, So my partner, he didn't like my behavior, and he was pointing out some things that I was doing. And I didn't like some of his behavior. I found anybody to be a threat to me, and I found especially men, but I like men, and I was always kind of, I longed for a relationship, and that intimacy, that closeness, right? And so we gave it a try, right? And I was always realizing that the door was there. If I wanted to leave, I could leave, and so I didn't want to get married and didn't believe in marriage, right? And I still have a problem with that. And so I didn't trust him. He was trying to trust me, but he wasn't so sure about me either because of my behavior. So he tried to tell me, that my behavior wasn't very good, and that I was hurting him, and that he wanted me to trust him, and I was having a hard time with that and didn't trust him, and I ended up pregnant and lost the baby halfway through, and used it as an excuse to leave. And so I took off and left for a year and went on my own at the age of 31, and then spent that whole year having to grieve because my mom had passed away, and the stuff that she had said to me before she passed away was just horrible. Like the year when I before I had moved to Canada in the first place, when she said that, you know, we were all just meant nothing to her, we were worthless. She didn't love us, didn't want us, and said that to my face, you know. To hurt me. That's why she did it. I think she was lying, but I think she was so hurtful and so sadistic, you know. And I took that so hard, you know. It took me a whole year to learn how, actually to cry, first of all. I really had to grieve because my mom passed away. I'd lost my baby and my boyfriend, so I'd lost everything, you know. And I was just living in this apartment with my sleeping bag and clothes, and that was it. And one chair, and, you know, that was it. So I felt like I was really at the rock bottom, you know, which I hadn't even hit rock bottom, but the thing was I felt that I was. And I had a hard time dealing with that, but I took a year off, and I took a year to heal and move through some of this stuff, which I did. And then I got back together with my sweetheart who had not given up on me and was waiting for me to call him, which is so cool because I love this man. We are still together today. And you know, I told him everything about my past. I told him about the life that I had lived with my parents, this horrible mess of abuse and domestic violence, and I didn't want any more of it. But again, I had to learn how to trust him, and that if he was going to have to prove himself worthy to me, to be trusted, and that he was going to have to show me that he could love me and not hurt me, not just tell me things. He was going to have to show me. And I said, you know, I could try to learn to trust him if he could learn to trust me to stay, because I was really always quite eager to run still, right? So, you know, I said, I'll try to change my behavior, and I'll try to be less abusive. And we had to learn how to be a team. And that's the whole issue, you know. It's all about teamwork. It's all about learning to deal with these things that come up. Conflict does happen. Things are going to come up. Anger is going to happen, right? Anger is normal. It's a natural thing. It's a natural emotion. And the whole issue is that it doesn't need to turn abusive, right? But if we don't know how to handle things properly because we've never been shown and just don't know how to deal with our own anger, then we can become abusive, right? And then we're just the abusers, which I did not want to be, right? So I had a lot of work to do, and it took me a long time. It really did. It didn't happen overnight. And some stuff that I was still doing was self-sabotaging throughout my life, and I had to have somebody actually show me that, because I didn't even realize I was self-sabotaging, you know, and ruining certain situations just because I was self-sabotaging. I didn't even know I was doing it. So that's why it's important to get help, you know, if you're having a hard time with this stuff, you know, and not become our parents, right? That was the whole issue. I didn't want to become my parents. I was like, oh my God, you know, Lord help me if I ever start becoming my parents, right? So that's the whole thing. And I thought, man, I got to work on myself, and it has taken me a long, long time, the better part of 10 years, and before I even started on my healing journey, and then another 3.5 now on my healing journey. It's almost taken me 14.5 years. And people will think, God, that's such a huge chunk of your life, and it is. And, you know, it's because I didn't want to go to therapy. I didn't trust therapists and counselors, right? And I think now I have a better understanding of what they're about, and they're not out to hurt people, most of them. I think they're out to do some good, and they do care, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, and that's the whole issue. And then if we find a counselor or therapist that doesn't work for us, we can just find another one. That's what I think. If we don't like the one that we're supposed to that we're with, then we can just find another one, because I've seen that on too many websites now, looking around. They said, you know, if you find a counselor and therapist or a therapist that's just not working with you, they don't seem to click, they don't seem to understand you, or it's just not something they specialize in, you know, that they wouldn't be able to help you, to look for another one, right? There's no harm done. Eventually, you know, you might run into the person that just clicks with you and just understands you, and you understand them, and it just works, right? And they can help you, right? So important that we get help, and eventually I probably will see a therapist, I'm sure of it. First I'll see a counselor, and then I'll see a therapist, right? I may not need therapy, but I think I can use a counselor. So it says here, number 15, think about the messages you received from your family and from society about what it is to be a man. Now, he's talking to men here, but see, I think this could be for a woman. Think about the messages you received from your family and from society about what it is to be a woman, right? Because my mom was also very abusive, right? And she would say she was trying to defend herself against my dad, which she really was. I don't think that she would have treated him the way she did if he hadn't been treating her the way that she was. My parents were like so screwed up. It was just not. It's not even funny. They were abused as children, and they did not know how to treat each other right, and they didn't know how to even treat themselves right or their children, and so they just had this huge mess of a marriage, and so it says here, control, abuse, and violence are learned. Begin to understand where and how you learn to be controlling and abusive, and work hard to counteract those messages. So this is a learned behavior, and that's what I'm very much spreading the word out there, because a lot of people are, that abuse is a choice. Abuse is definitely a choice. It's a learned behavior. It's what we choose to do, controlling people, abusing people, the violence, right? It's a learned behavior. So we have to learn how to change that, right? I mean, and my parents really, they were told to get court-ordered counseling. The courts ordered them to get counseling because they were brought up on child abuse charges. And they were, they went to 2 counseling sessions, and that's it. And then we moved, they just fell out of the system. And back in like 1967, nobody really cared whether you beat your children or not. Back in 1967, you could beat your children in the store and nobody would think twice. They'd be like, yeah, give it to them. You know what I mean? I was beaten out in parking lots, out in stores, out in public. I was beaten out in the front yard, in front of people, in front of cars driving by, and nobody would stop and say, hey, what are you doing to that child? But I'm not talking, a spank on the butt, man. I'm talking a severe beating. And, people, there's no way people would intervene. They'd be like, oh, well, too bad for that girl, or, yeah, look at that parent giving that child a beating. That's probably what they deserve. Because, see, back in 1967 and 1970 and 72, child abuse was pretty much, no one was really interested in stopping it at that point. There were groups out there talking about it, and there were certain television shows who were starting to bring awareness about it. But in the 50s, it was just a thing to do, to beat on your children, right? And so it was all about, respect the dad, respect the parents, respect authority back in the 1950s. Then in the 1960s, it was like, okay, let loose on your children and do whatever you want to them. And then in the 70s, they started to bring a little bit of awareness about child abuse. Not much, but just at least showing it on TV and saying, hey, this is wrong. And it's taken a long, long time to change the hearts and minds of people that it's wrong to do that to your children. It's extremely wrong. And so control and abuse and violence, man, it's all learned. And we have to learn how to stop our own abusive behavior, right? I mean, my parents were told to get counseling and they didn't bother, and so, they just continued on in their mess. And we have a responsibility as adults to, and as survivors, if you're a survivor of child abuse, and even if you're not and you just have abusive behaviors, we are responsible for our own behaviors. That's what I kept trying to tell my parents. As an adult, I'd be like, you guys are responsible for your own behavior. Look what you did to your children. Look what you did to each other. Look what you have done to your life and your family. You have completely destroyed it. And, because I was trying to make them see what they had done to us, right, because they didn't care. And they would literally say, well, it was your father's fault. Or, my dad would say, well, it was your mother's fault. Or it was the devil. Or it was the 1960s. Or whatever their stupid excuse was. They would never, ever take responsibility for what they did. They would never say, I know, we're so sorry that we hurt you. And we're so sorry that we hurt the family. No, they didn't care. And actually, my dad still doesn't. And my mom is in the grave, so I don't know. She never did apologize, really. She said she was a bad mother, but that was about it. But I think she was just feeling sorry for herself. She was crying, and she was dying, right? She was on her deathbed. So she never once apologized for what she had done to me, and because I think she felt perfectly okay with it. But the thing is that it's abuse, and it's wrong. And as adults, if we're going to abuse people, we are just as bad as those who abused us. And that's why it was very important for me to change my behavior, because I did not want to become my parents, because I did not appreciate what they did. And so I thought, man, I can't be like them. I'm going to have to learn how to control myself. So what I did was I stuffed my anger because I didn't know how to deal with it. So instead of letting it out and learning how to deal with it, I didn't want to hurt anybody anymore. So I thought, okay, I'll just stuff it. So I stuffed my anger, and then it became very much self-directed and internalized. Right? So then I was just angry at the world, angry at myself, and just wanting to self-injure and all this, right? So, that's not good either, right? And wanting to end my life. So we have to learn how to deal with this stuff, and we are very much responsible for our life as an adult, right? And that's why it became very clear to me 3.5 years ago that if I wanted to have a good life, I was going to have to be the one to do it. I couldn't ask somebody else to do it for me. There's no way that they could. And I couldn't ask that somebody else would take away my pain because there's no way that they could. It was going to be all up to me. And I thought, and as soon as I realized that, I got busy, really busy. And so it's very important that we do, realize that it is our choice and that we have the options. The options are in front of us, and we can change the behaviors. We can change all that. We can't change the past, but we can change how we feel about things now. And we can change how we feel about ourselves. And I think that's the biggest issue, is to change how we feel about ourselves, right? I had to change how I felt about myself. I was no longer looking at myself as this kid that my parents had painted for me. This kid who was just worthless and stupid and ignorant and bad. I was always just this bad, horrible, evil kid, right, to my parents, right? And worthless, right? So I had to change that, and I started to realize, hey, I was not worthless, and I was not bad. And I was not all these horrible things, a whore and a slut and everything else my mom called me. I was none of those things. I was a good kid, and I started to reach into that little child inside of me, and I started to learn how to self-nurture, to nurture myself, right, and to learn to love myself and change the way that I felt about myself, because I knew I could never change the past. So I said, okay, what can I do? Well, I can change how I feel right now. So I started to learn how to love myself, and that made all the difference. It really did. Because somebody had to love that person inside of me, and I knew my parents didn't. And my dad's 87 years old, and he says stuff, I love you, but he doesn't even understand what love is. He doesn't understand what caring about people really is. And people would disagree, but if you really knew what was going on in his heart, you would know that, right? He doesn't understand it. He doesn't get it. He knows how to say the words, but he doesn't know how to mean it, right? And so, whereas my mom, she wouldn't throw that word around very often. Once in a while, when she was thinking she was going to die, it would come out of her mouth. But other than that, when she was on her deathbed in the hospital, which she was quite often, then she would come out, I love my family, and then she'd get out of the hospital, heal, and then beat your ass, or kick you around, call you names, She was just, they were very messed up. So, I didn't want to be like that. And I thought, well, how can I have to work on myself, and we have to not become these abusive, controlling people, right? That's the whole issue. If we're going to stop this mess and have a good life, right? Number 16, redefine your manhood as non-controlling, non-abusive, and non-violent. Of course, because he's talking to men, right? He says, learn to jettison the macho and destructive messages and life scripts that contribute to your controlling and abusive thoughts and behaviors in the present. And that's for, he's talking to men here, but honestly, women can be very destructive too, and women can be very controlling and have abusive thoughts and behaviors too. My mom was like the number one, abusive person that I knew, right? Well, besides her mom, my grandmother, which I couldn't stand. She was a horrible woman. And so my mom became her mother, and I did not want to become my mother, I'll tell you that. So, it's very important that we don't play these life scripts out, these controlling and abusive life scripts that, in the now, right? We've got to learn how to become non-controlling, non-abusive, and non-violent, right? Number 17, take the risk to count on other men for emotional support. Develop friends and confidants with whom you can share your joys, sorrows, and difficulties in a consistent and ongoing way. So he's talking to men here, but I think everybody needs to learn how to develop friends and how to find people in our lives who can be there for us, so we can share these things, these joys, these sorrows, these difficulties, right? It's so important for men and women to do that. And, it's good to have friends. And, I know for a long time I didn't have any friends. Now I have a whole bunch of friends. And why? Because I started to reach out. They would have never reached out to me because they didn't know me. How would they know? So that's why it's so important to reach out and get some help, right? It truly is. So tomorrow morning I'll be back on 6 o'clock in the morning. I'll also be on tonight as well, both Dreamcatchers Talk Radio and my own show. So check my show page there if you're interested in tuning in. Have a great day, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you reach out and get some help. You do count. You absolutely do matter, and you matter to me. And so, if you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio, Facebook. As I always say, I'm usually around. And to take good care of yourselves, just reach out, get some help. Don't suffer alone in sadness and silence and just suffering along. I mean, I did that for so many years, 41 years, and it's a long time to be on your own with this sort of stuff. I hope that you will reach out and get some help, and if you have to, you call a crisis line, do whatever you have to do, but you make sure you stick around with us. We do count. We do matter, and I'm glad I finally figured it out for myself. And I'm fighting to stay here and fighting to have a good life, right? So I hope that you will do the same. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.